Hello everyone and welcome back to Loch Ness Exploration. This year the quest weekend started on Thursday the 22nd and would come to a close on Sunday the 25th. Before we dive into our update, I cannot stress enough just how hard Amy Todd has been working to ensure that everyone was included and well looked after. This was months in the making and a super daunting task, but as always, she absolutely smashed it. So a huge thank you to both Amy Todd and the Loch Ness Centre. It was an early start for most of us on this beautiful Thursday morning. The sun was out and about, which means that I, as a pale blue Scotsman, was in serious danger of bursting into flames. En route to Temple Pier, my mind was filled with questions, scenarios, expectations and excitement, all of which are fully justified, and here's why. The Loch Ness Centre in L&E joined forces with Little Loch Broom Marine Life. And yes, that is a tongue twister. Much like L&E, Little Loch Broom Marine Life is a voluntary community science group which was set up back in 2019. This amazing group conducts regular seashore surveys off Loch Broom and Ullapool to identify and to learn more about its diverse marine life. So as you can imagine, we were delighted to hear that they were joining us and coming on board for this year's quest weekend. But they weren't coming alone. The team will be exploring certain areas off Loch Ness with their advanced chasing M2 ROV. In other words, a remote operated vehicle. Due to its lightweight design, it's able to navigate through tight spaces and withstand immense pressures. With the ROV, we were hoping to capture something both meaningful and worthwhile below the surface. With everyone on board Deepscan, Ali Matheson suggested that we should head towards the southern shoreline, which at this point was roughly 1.6 miles away from Temple Pier. The ROV can dive up to 150 metres, but as you know, the max depth of Loch Ness is around 230 metres. We already predicted that the ROV would be unlikely to deliver any results from mid-water deployment. On facing that reality, Ali allowed Deepscan to drift towards the shoreline, close to Whitefield. With the engine off, the ROV was aimed directly below us, in hope of finding the steep loch wall. But believe it or not, this was actually more difficult than I originally thought. As time pressed on, the loch was becoming restless, and Deepscan was drifting further and further away from the southern shoreline. It was decided that we'd all head back to Temple Pier so that we could explore Urquhart Bay and the surrounding shoreline. Now that we were all back on dry land, it was time to meet another legend from the Loch Ness community. Say hello to Gordon Menzies. We were incredibly grateful towards Gordon as he granted us special permission to use his private pier and away from the nosy reporters. From Gordon's pier, the team deployed the ROV and the baited camera traps. They were determined to deliver results, and I believe that determination paid off. The camera traps allowed us to observe life below the surface, with certain species of fish being more braver and more curious than others. One species in particular showed absolutely no fear whatsoever. A monster in its own right, with a long torpedo-shaped body, razor-sharp teeth, capable of incredible speed, carnivorous by nature, and strong enough to attack birds resting on the surface. All those traits belong to the pike, the ambush predator of Loch Ness. Now, according to Adrian Shine for the Loch Ness project, this might actually be the first time that a pike has been filmed hunting below the surface. The baited camera traps were certainly impressive, and I'm sure most of you will agree. But for me personally, the biggest discovery of the day was captured by the ROV. Now, before we explore that discovery, there's a few wee things that you need to know. Gordon is a wonderful storyteller, and if I had my way, I'd gather everyone together and sit around the campfire, encouraging Gordon to share more stories and his experience over the years at Loch Ness. He was also kind enough to show us another lost and found relic linked to Loch Ness. This item was once attached to John Cobb's Crusader. Little did we know that John Cobb and his fate would play such a role in the quest weekend. As it turns out, Gordon was actually there and present on the 29th of September 1952. At this point in time, Gordon was only 12 years old, but he still remembers every detail and the emotional reaction of those who witnessed the tragic accident, including John Cobb's loved ones. After hours of talking and exploring the past, we couldn't quite believe what the team and the ROV discovered next. We stumbled upon the ruins and the old original temple pier from where John Cobb set off in Crusader to attempt the world water speed record. Now talk about coincidence. It was a very heartfelt moment that we all shared with one another, particularly for Gordon. This discovery had meaning, and it was a wonderful reminder of the rich history within Loch Ness. This year we had an incredible team in place, with familiar faces returning and welcoming new members to L&E. Seeing everyone working together was honestly so rewarding, and it's always great when everyone just instantly clicks with one another. And that's what it's all about, bringing people together from all walks of life. Now, I don't think we'll ever establish or achieve what the original Loch Ness Investigation Bureau had from 62 to 72, but we certainly captured the spirit, and that is something that we are very, very proud of. We will always be open and honest with you, so therefore we need to admit that there wasn't anything unusual or significant that happened during the surface watch throughout the day, despite the team being in different locations around the loch. However, something extraordinary happened at night when exploring the shorelines near Urquhart Castle, and it is something that has yet to be fully explained. At night, our team split up into two groups to cover 2 points of interest. The first was a long jetty where we've been many times before to use the hydrophone, and the second was a small rocky beach just below the castle. Dave Hastings and I based ourselves at the rocky shoreline, and we were amazed to see just how low the water level was here, to the point where you could walk about 4 or 5 feet out, and then it was a sudden drop into those famous deep, dark waters. We threw several large rocks into the water to get an idea of how deep this area was. Now, I know that's not the most reliable way to discover the answer, but it gave us a rough idea at the very least. After some time with no activity, Dave and I agreed to join the others back on the jetty. Just as we were about to turn and walk away, we heard a large disturbance just beyond the shoreline. We very clearly observed a large amount of water being displaced and rushing towards the shoreline. So much so that Dave and I had to take several steps back. And if you were there, you would have done the same thing. Trust me on that. Now, I personally didn't see an object, but Dave was adamant that he observed something black for a split second. Now, you could ask how we were able to see anything in that dark environment, but we had two very powerful torches at hand, and thankfully we were quick enough to focus our torches on the area of interest. Whatever we observed was travelling from our right to left and heading towards the open bay. After backing away from the shoreline, we froze. We fell silent. Dave and I didn't speak to each other for quite some time, but we both knew that we were trying to process what had just happened and what could have caused such a reaction. A few moments later, while still on location, I received a phone call from Roland Watson. I was just starting to explain what Dave and I had witnessed together, and then in disbelief, it happened again. But this time, it was coming from our left to right. We observed another large white wash of water. So what did we observe? I can't tell you what it was, but I can tell you what it wasn't. It was not a boat wake. It was not a random wave reaching the shore. It wasn't a fish leaping from the water, and it wasn't wind turbulence reaching the surface. In my opinion, if this event was caused by seals or otters, then they would need to be of a significant size to cause such commotion. Sunday the 25th. With the sun setting, this was to be our last evening on the quest weekend. Weather conditions were far from ideal, as it was absolutely lashing it down with heavy rainfall. But as always, we marched on. There's dedication, and then there's the L&E team. Tonight we were attempting a little experiment inspired by fellow investigator Dick Rayner. We brought a very basic underwater speaker with us this evening, with the intention of placing it into the loch and then playing a variety of different marine sounds below the surface, and wait patiently for any potential response, if any. As you know, it was our good friend Dick Rayner who first introduced me and Eleni to the hydrophone studies within Loch Ness. This intriguing experiment was first completed by Dick Rayner and Isaac Blonder back in 1975, 3 years after the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau was disbanded. But this was our first attempt to recreate that experiment, and if anything, we viewed this more as a test rather than fully exploring the whole process. So back in 1975, did Isaac and Dick ever record something that caught their attention? And the answer is yes. Both Dick and Isaac recorded a strange moment that was first interpreted as the sound of mating crustaceans, which I found really quite bizarre. But Dick eventually found the origin of the sound, and it was put down to electrical interference. So I'm sorry guys, it's not as erotic or even exotic as mating crustaceans. As previously mentioned, our attempt was nothing more than a test, but it's something that we would like to revisit at some point later down the road. So has Isaac Blonder, Dick Rayner and L&E discovered anything significant during these hydrophone studies? Well, that answer really depends on the individual who's asking the question. There's no doubt that past and present recordings are intriguing, but whether these recordings are considered significant depends on your expectations and interpretations. If you're expecting to hear the roar of the Loch Ness Monster, then that's exactly what you're going to hear. If you're expecting to hear natural sound caused by the environment, then again, that is exactly what you will hear. The point that I'm trying to make is that our hydrophone research and the results cater to everyone, and hopefully one day we can provide some valuable insight. I think it's fair to assume that Dick believes that these hydrophone studies at Loch Ness are far from being done and dusted. He wouldn't have suggested this approach if it was doomed to fail. Even Adrian Shine has said that there's unfinished business here at Loch Ness, which is a fantastic statement, and I personally believe it's a statement that covers all aspects of the Loch Ness story. I'm going to leave you now with a quick thank you to everyone involved for your support, your loyalty, your dedication, and your friendship. Guys, I very quickly just wanted to say a personal thank you to everyone who joined us over the quest weekend this year. I thought it was brilliant. It's probably my favourite one so far, and I cannot thank you enough for joining us this year. So What are you doing? What the hell are you doing? Get back in. No, 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 no. I don't want to hear it. We've spoken about this. Nope. Nope. If you shuffle on camera now, you'll have every hunt in the world after you. Do you want that? No, exactly. Get your arse back in. Need to finish this. Unbelievable. We said 1 hump, 2 humps. On very special occasions, they hold and then down again, all right? Get your arse back in. Unbelievable. You've ruined my shot. Bloody monster.